The second strategy used by the media is they pick up, used by the media and in fact even the critics of Islam, is they pick up verses of the glorious Qur'an and they quote it out of context. And one such example is wherein the critics of Islam, and a famous critic by the name of Arun Shuri, he writes in his book The World of Fatwas, and he quotes Surah At-Tawbah chapter number 9 verse number 5, and he says that the glorious Qur'an says in Surah At-Tawbah chapter number 9 verse number 5, wherever you find a kafir you should kill him. If you open the glorious Qur'an, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does say in the glorious Qur'an in Surah At-Tawbah chapter number 9 verse number 5, wherever you find a kafir you should kill him, but it is in context. In order to read the context, you need to read from the start of Surah At-Tawbah, from verse number 1. In the first few verses of Surah At-Tawbah chapter number 9, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about a peace treaty between the mushriks of Makkah and the Muslims. And this peace treaty is unilaterally broken by the mushriks of Makkah. And by the time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reaches verse number 4 and 5, he is giving the mushriks of Makkah an ultimatum, a warning that time, otherwise declaration of war. And later on, when the mushriks of Makkah, they break the peace treaty, war is declared. And in Surah At-Tawbah chapter number 9 verse number 5, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, in the battlefield, it is in context, in the battlefield, wherever you find the enemies, wherever you find the non-Muslims, when you are fighting them, kill them. And any army general boost the morale of his soldiers, he will say, wherever you find the enemies, kill them. The army general will not say that run away. So we need to look at the context. For example, if there is a war going on between USA and Vietnam, and the USA Army General tells his soldiers that wherever you find a Vietnamese, you kill him, it is in context. It is in the battlefield. But today, if I quote the USA Army General, and if I say that the USA Army General is saying wherever you find a Vietnamese today, you kill him, I would make him sound like a butcher. So it is in context, it is in the battlefield. So the critics of Islam, they pick up verses of the glorious Qur'an and they quote it out of context. And if you read the Hindu scriptures, it talks about fighting against oppression. And in the Hindu scriptures, it is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 1, verse number 46, 47 and 48. It talks about the war against oppression, against injustice. And Krishna tells Arjun, encouraging him to fight against oppression, to fight against injustice. And in fact, in Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 1, verse number 46, 47, 48, Arjun says that I would prefer an armed rather than fighting with my relatives. And in Bhagavad Gita, chapter number 2, verse number 2 and 3, it is mentioned, Krishna tells Arjun that how can you be so important? It is the duty of a Kshatriya, of a warrior to fight. And even if it be against your relatives. Now if I quote the Hindu scriptures and if I say that Krishna said to Arjun that fight your relatives, but naturally it is out of context. It is in context. It is in the battlefield to fight against oppression, to fight against injustice. So here we realize the critics of Islam, they pick up verses of the glorious Qur'an and they quote these verses of the glorious Qur'an out of context. And after quoting Surah At-Tawbah chapter number 9 verse number 5, if we read the next verse of Surah At-Tawbah chapter number 9 verse number 6, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if the enemies, they want peace, don't just grant it to them, escort them to a place of security. Today, the most generous army general, maximum he can tell the enemies is go away, you are free. But the glorious Qur'an goes a step further and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that do not just grant it to them, escort them to a place of. Certain people, they may argue and say that the glorious Qur'an says escort them to a place of security so that they will establish prayer, and if they become Muslims, then only release them. This is mentioned in the glorious Qur'an, but at the same time, the glorious Qur'an also mentions, and the meaning is that if the enemies, even if they don't accept Islam, if they are asking for peace, then peace should be granted to them. So the glorious Qur'an is very crystal clear as promoting peace is concerned. Islam, it is the religion of peace. And Arun Shuri, after quoting Surah At-Tawbah, chapter number 9, verse number 5, he directly jumps to verse number 7. Why? Because verse number 6 has the answer or the response to sickness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah At-Tawbah, chapter number 9, verse number 6, that if the enemies want peace, escort them to a place of security. So here we realize the critics of Islam, they pick up verses of the glorious Qur'an and they quote it out of context.